Lexie Hull is here to talk all things Lexie, women's basketball, Indiana Fever, Pac-12, lot to get to. Locked on Women's Basketball starts now.
Ogunbowale for the win. Good!
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.
Well, hi, everybody, and happy Wednesday to you. I'm your host, Howard Megdal, and I want to thank you for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every single day. You guys have really continued showing up. We are on track to once again have over 100,000 listeners this month alone. That'll be our fourth straight month doing it. It's wonderful to see you guys showing up the way we're showing up as well. And of course, it is not just me, it is the entire team over at thenexthoops.com covering all 12 WNBA teams, college, high school, international, you name it. Go to thenexthoops.com, subscribe for $9 a month or $72 a year. Make sure you are supporting the coverage that we need in women's basketball. And good Lord, we need it for Lexie Hull, who is everywhere, whether it is playing off-season, whether it is playing AU, whether it is playing 3-on-3, whether it is playing with the Indiana Fever. We have a lot to talk about year-round. So Lexie, first of all, thank you for generating so many stories for us. We really appreciate it.
Oh, well, thanks for having me. It's been great.
I want to start by talking about, in segment one, the growth here in Indiana. For you, for the Fever as a whole, it's a really interesting team. It's a team that is showing signs of making the leap forward that I know Lynn Dunn has conceived for you guys. And I just like top line, as you're looking at it, you're a player who has been a winner everywhere you've gone. This is obviously a challenge. There are more losses than wins. That's how rebuilding goes. Take me through how you just like psychologically navigate that space and appreciate the small wins along the way to getting those victories that I know you guys want.
Yeah, I mean, this season, last season, definitely a new experience. Being on a team and in a program that loses more games than we've won over the course of the past 2 years. And so coming in, it was definitely a big transition, trying to figure out how to make that change, how to make that progress as a group. And I think this year especially, we're seeing just a lot of glimpses of really great things happening. We can see progress happening. And I think as a group, we're just really having to buy into the process that rebuild is, shaky at the start. We have a lot of things to learn, a lot of things to make better as a group. And I think just being able to trust the process and know that we're moving in the right direction, I think that's kind of been the psychological change going into the season.
The way I view it always is the wins are like a safe opening and all the numbers of the combinations are in place. But that happens at the very end. And you can look, just go to offensive rating and to see you guys jump from 12th last year to 5th this year, you can see some significant differences. And I know for you specifically, you've been in the starting lineup now for 25 games so far this year. I just wonder how much you feel like spacing has been a primary part of what has allowed you guys to be more effective at the offensive end.
Yeah, I think getting the right pieces in here. Aaliyah's been an incredible addition to our offense. She spaces the floor in her own way. She has some games has 3 people pulling towards her. So obviously that changes the spacing of our offense. And just figuring out how to play off of that, how to make the right reads, how to make the right cuts, make the right passes. It's all a learning game, and we're really, I think, growing as a group.
I know that Lynn Dunn targeted you coming into the 2022 draft, and there were a few reasons for that. And, to get into the specifics of it, first was the fact that Lynn values defense, and Lord knows, dating back to your time at Stanford and before, this has always been a calling card of yours. When you think about being a presence on the floor, how much is defense sort of at the top of the way in which you think about the way in which you want to impact a game?
I think that's my number one role is guarding the other team's best guard, figuring out how to be long, how to make them change the way they play offense and take away things that they want. I think with my length on the wing, it's really helpful on the defensive end. And I think, every team you're trying to figure out what your role is, trying to figure out what piece you are to the puzzle of a winning team. And I think coming in, that's kind of been Christy's main thing for me is be locked in defensively, be disciplined, and then let the offensive come. And I've been trying to do that this season.
Something that I think is a really interesting part of that defense is you generate steals, you generate turnovers. You're top 10 in the league in steal percentage. You would have been last year. It's just a question of minutes played to be able to qualify for the leaderboard. But being able to get those kinds of turnovers, and specifically live ball turnovers, how much is that, do you think, a part of the offense? I know this is sort of counterintuitive, but of the offensive jump that you guys have made this year, because you guys are up across the board.
Yeah, I think it's a huge part. Obviously, those live ball turnovers lead to higher percentage shots on the offensive side, and then it also leads to momentum. I think when we have breakaway layups, wide open threes in transition, that gets our team going offensively, and then everyone else feeds off of that. So we've always said that our offense starts on the defensive side, and I think that's a really, really important point.
I think it's really interesting, and I want to touch on this because I think it's challenging for anyone. I know I've talked to players, you come out of college, you come to the pros, and more limited minutes make it harder to get into a shooting rhythm. And I just want to share the numbers this year because your true shooting percentage is up this year. There's been ups and downs. When you have played 20 to 29 minutes, the 3-point percentage doubles from 11 to 22%. When you've gotten north of 30, you're shooting 33.3% from three. Clearly shooting is a rhythm game. And so for you, I know you've thought about it. I'm sure you've thought about it. How do you go about finding that rhythm in more limited opportunities? What are some tactics you use?
I mean, first and foremost, it's getting reps outside of game shots, and I know I've been putting in the work. So I think it's at times I've had a few droughts, I would say, where I've gone a few games without hitting my shots. But I think just letting the game come to me, any open shot, any good shot is a good shot for me. So just making sure that I take the open ones and take the good ones, and hopefully more fall than don't. But I do think getting in a rhythm. When our team is playing well, everyone's threes are hitting better. It's such a momentum game that I feel like we all just kind of feed off of each other in that way.
I just want to point out for our listeners, just so we understand, Lexie was a 40% three-point shooter in college. Lexie, you've been shooting north of 85% from the line, which is the best indicator of future performance when it comes to three-point shooting. The shooting's obviously didn't come. It shouldn't be, you've been a knockdown shooter everywhere you've gone. So I look forward to seeing that. And it's interesting to me, because on top of it, you talk about having the reps and getting the opportunities. Is confidence a thing that goes into it? We've been doing this diary series over at the 9 with Maddie Segrist, and Maddie went from, she played 38 minutes a game at Villanova, and now she's coming off the bench in Dallas and figuring out, how to make sure that first shot, she feels it the way she would feel shot 15 or shot 20 when she was playing with Villanova. How do you make sure that you maintain that confidence? Are there other ways you can do that extend beyond just getting the reps?
At least for me, I've always felt better taking my first three after I've either gotten to the line or gotten an easy layup. So not my first three of the game, the first minute or so is a three. So I think for me, that kind of helps my confidence is getting an easy one early, and then the rest kind of finds its way in.
When you think about this Fever team, if you guys fall short of the playoffs going into the offseason, what are you grabbing onto as this was the best example of the way in which we grew this year? Is there a metric? Is there a moment? Is there something that really stands out for you in that way?
For us, we've already talked about the first half of the season. Our record wasn't what we thought it could have been. We've been in a lot of close games within 5 points in the last few minutes. And I think for us, being able to just convert a few of those games, we're looking at a different outcome. We could have, made the playoffs, we still can, but
Yeah.
had a closer run for the playoffs. So I think for us, just knowing that we're competing with every team, we can beat any team. That brings me confidence. That brings our team confidence, because we know that with a little bit more chemistry, a little bit more reps, and the W level, we'll be right there.
My fearless prediction was that you guys were a playoff team this year, even if you fall a little bit short. Very eager to see what's to come. But in segment 2, I'm very excited to talk to you about everything from the offseason landscape to even the dearly departed Pac-12. First, going to let good people know at home about FanDuel. And FanDuel, our sponsor today, football season is about to kick off, and FanDuel is giving you a chance to win all season long. So if you bet on a Super Bowl winner, you can get bonus bets every time that team wins in the regular season. You just pick any team to win the Super Bowl, and you get bonus bets for every victory. You can use your bonus bets on spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So all you have to do is go to visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/LOCKEDON, and you can start earning bonus bets with America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. So it's almost funny to think about the many areas in which you have explored the women's basketball landscape already. Whether we're talking about limited, we're talking about playing 3-on-3, to played collegiately at the W level. You have overseas opportunities if you ever want to pursue them. I'm just wondering, we're sitting here, it's August 16th. What are you thinking about the WNBA offseason opportunities and sort of how you fit into it? I don't just mean oh, gee, where are you going in a couple of months? I mean, how do you think about the Lexie Hull project writ large and how it works in the offseason?
I feel like I've always been someone that likes to kind of do everything, do a little bit of everything. So I think that's kind of my plan again. There's some 3-on-3 opportunities that could happen in October. Still waiting on the final word for that. AU had a really good time, so planning on doing that again. And last year I was back in Indy for a handful of weeks, so planning on doing that. I enjoy being a lot of places a lot of the time, so that's kind of my plan again.
Do you think that this landscape, and the thing that keeps coming back to for me when we talk to people across the league, is there are choices now. There are choices in a way that 5 years ago we couldn't even have imagined. And does it feel freeing in that way as you're having those conversations? And does it feel different, let's say, than the way you conceived of it even when you were a freshman, sophomore at Stanford, and thinking about this world ahead for you?
Yeah, for sure. I think, even a few years ago, the really only option for W players to make any type of living was to go overseas and play basketball year-round competitively. And now players get the opportunity to kind of choose what they want to do. I know some people are staying and going to get broadcasting jobs and going to work for companies that the WNBA has partnerships with. I mean, either go back to school, work on a business degree. There's a lot of things now that even our Players Association has kind of helped give opportunities to players in the off season. So it's exciting to see where it's going, because you look at our counterpart in the NBA, and there's no player going overseas to play. They're taking the break on their bodies and they're getting healthy for the next season. So I think down the line, I hope that's what the seasons look like for everyone in the W.
Do you think there is that sort of balancing point for you? How, I guess here's the better way to ask that question. Is there an amount of time off you think that would be ideal? And when you consider your offseason opportunities, and I'm sure you have broadcasting opportunities too. I have heard a Stanford education is useful to open doors as well. Do you let the rest time dictate it? Do you let the opportunities dictate? How do you go and organize your thinking about offseason?
I think it's person by person. I know I put my body through a lot in the season.
Yeah.
But for me, I think in planning my off season, it's kind of when those opportunities arise, and then I'll rest in between those. Because I think my body's capable of kind of doing whatever comes up whenever, because I stay ready the whole off season anyway. But it's just, taking rest from games and that huge impact on my body.
That must be, I get tired just writing about all the things you do. It's an amazing thing.
It's a workout, I'm sure.
I congratulate you. That's a wonderful thing. So the 3-on-3 you're saying in October, it leads to, the conversation. Unrivaled has been part of the conversation too. People having a talk about not just 5-on-5, but 3-on-3, even 1-on-1 opportunities. Do you feel as if your game is uniquely tailored for the fact that we're going into all these different directions, and these opportunities aren't necessarily the traditional 5-on-5 game that we have come to know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like my first experience really playing 3-on-3 last year, I felt very comfortable in the environment, I guess. I feel like it tailored to some of my best attributes as a player. And so I'm excited for the potential for that kind of area of basketball to grow, and exciting to see what Unrivaled has in store for this offseason.
I am curious, and I know we talked about how much you enjoyed 3-on-3 the last time you were here on the program, but the ability to get into passing lanes, is it easier? Is it harder? Is it just a different lift? Like, what is that like? I know that's, obviously as much as anything, your calling card on the defensive end.
It's different. I mean, you don't have, for 3-on-3, you don't have like that backside help as you would. So I think it's a risk trying to get in the passing lanes, because against a good player, they're just going to go backdoor, get an easy layup. So it's a balance of figuring out when to kind of go for it when you can get that steal, or kind of holding back and waiting for your opportunity to make that decision.
Is there anything more fun than when you've made that calculation correctly and you are flying to the rim and there's nobody in front of you?
It's the best feeling. I think that's getting a good stop, getting a steal on defense is for me more exciting, because I know I screwed up what they were doing, which is like it's rewarding in that way.
Think of yourself more as a foil and a nemesis in that scenario.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, to go beyond even just all these opportunities, we're also entering an off season on the WNBA side, but in a season of real uncertainty on the collegiate end of things. And, I know as somebody who's a product of the Pac-12, what you've been observing over the last couple of weeks has to be very sad. Having played with Lexie there, having so much history there. Take me through just like what it's been like for you observing, and just what are your thoughts about the landscape and how it's changed so much over the last couple of weeks?
I was pretty shocked seeing everything kind of transpire over a couple days. Teams leaving the Pac-12, and the Pac-12, I mean, basically being no longer a conference with so few teams. So it's sad, because in my time at Stanford, Pac-12 was one of, if not the best college basketball conference. I mean, we had over half of the teams going to the NCAA tournament every year, and competing to make it to the Final Four. My year when we won the national championship, it was 2 Pac-12 teams. So, I mean, it's been a powerhouse of a conference for women's basketball alone, and seeing that kind of go away, it's sad, because we enjoyed going to the Pac-12 tournament in Vegas every year. It's been such a integral part of college basketball in my memory and my time at Stanford. So it's sad, because I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know where Stanford's going to go. I don't know what it's going to look like for the players that are still there, whether that's going to be traveling way, way, way farther away for games. It's going to look different. So it's definitely something I'm keeping my eye on. But it is what it is at this point.
Do you have a memory of the Pac-12 tournament that sticks out? Like when you kind of close your eyes and think about it, I'm wondering if there's something that was specifically like your best Pac-12 moment.
I mean, we won it. Every time we won it was my favorite time. So it's hard to choose which one, but it was great. I mean, that was my friends, my family, they always would come out for that tournament. So being there for 4 or 5 days was really fun for us. And we kind of got used to, I think we were at the Mohegan Sun every time. So just kind of, it was a tradition every year, and it was enjoyable because for our team, I feel like we always played our best basketball there.
That's my favorite humble brag I think I've heard in quite some time, that every time we won was my favorite moment. I like that very much. We're going to be right back, and we're going to design the future of women's college basketball in just a second. Nice and easy, just in just a moment. Okay, so we are back and in position to just figure out the future of women's college basketball, specifically for Stanford. And I don't think that I am in the wrong place to say that Stanford matters more than a lot of other programs. And so when we think about it, we think about the Pac-12 is 108 years, and trying to design what the future looks like. I want to start with the thing you mentioned and the thing I keep thinking about, which is the amount of travel you're talking about would be enormous. Things like Stanford to the Ivy League. It makes sense from an academic perspective. And it would be obviously great to see Stanford at Penn and Princeton. But that's a crazy amount of travel for, what we're talking about. You have Stanford out west, whether it's in the West Coast Conference or the WAC or, any of the other combinations we've talked about. But the rivalries aren't natural. And it's a different type of university than Stanford. So what do you think makes the most sense? How would you, like, if we give you the head of women's college basketball, you're the dictator in women's college basketball, what are you doing with Stanford?
That's so hard because in my mind, I think what made our team so good by the end of the year was playing such hard competition multiple times. And, we would play and we'd have so many close games in the Pac-12. So I think for me, in my mind, I would choose a route that's going to make our team the best by the end of the year. I think that's our goal, is to be able to be at the end of the year, playing our best basketball, having played the best competition that there is. And so I would say, have them be an independent school, like UConn kind of was, and just play a bunch of the best competition throughout the country, plan trips where they're playing schools that are nearby. So we're not going back and forth from the East to the West Coast every weekend. But it's sad because I don't think there is a great answer to it at this point when the Pac-12 is dissolved. I think that was the best option, but obviously there's more in it now, more money involved. And so when you think about basketball, but then you think about how many sports Stanford has and what's the right answer for our athletic department as a whole, I think we're getting into a much bigger discussion because football is its own thing. And I think that's kind of been the big determining factor for schools leaving. And then there's all these other sports that are kind of getting pulled along with it. So, I don't have the answer. And it's going to be interesting to see what they kind of decide. If
it makes you feel any better, no one seems to have the answer as well. I'd still be fine with you being dictator of all women's basketball. I think that would be a really solid role. It's something that, listen, just think it over. I know you have a lot going on this offseason, but, maybe you just want to add that to the list. Well, Lexie Hull, it is always delightful to chat with you. I want to thank our listeners for making us your first listen every day. Lexie, we have somebody named Christy Wallace coming on the show tomorrow. Is that
Yay! I don't know her. I've never met her.
We'll ask her some questions and find out. Yes, Christy is a repeat on the show as well. I'm looking forward to that. So thank you for your time. Thank you to our listeners. And until tomorrow, I am Howard Megdal, wishing all of you a wonderful Wednesday.
Ogunbowale for the win.
Good! You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.